Really at hand. But since CALLERLAB's members are unaccustomed to walking outdoors to get to CALLERLAB convention sessions, we thought we'd give them just a couple of more minutes to make it across the street and try to avoid getting run down. Also, we don't need to spread out and fill the entire hall. If you'd like to come down a little closer, as we learned this morning, the sound in here is pretty good. You can hear anywhere you are, and that's good, but we'd kind of like to have you in closer where we can see you. We can scan from side to side, but John has tunnel vision, and so he wanted to see if we could get people in close to the center there. Actually, I wanted to start out by stealing just a few minutes from this voice presentation to take the opportunity to editorialize just a bit, and perhaps that's a good way to use up the time while the people make their way across the street. I have, as any of you who know me realize and have known over the years, very strong opinions about everything to do with square dancing. I'm very happy to share those opinions, always with the qualification that you should understand they are opinions. We don't have all the answers in our activity yet, but I feel quite strongly that some things need saying, and I'd like to borrow, as I said, about 3 minutes of your time to share with you some thoughts about where we are in the activity. The theme of this convention is music, our most important ally. Our session this afternoon is one element of that theme, and we will get to it in just a moment. However, I have an observation to make that is more directly related to the overall theme than it is to the specific element of voice, and I ask your indulgence while I use this forum to express a very strong feeling of mine. The message I wish to send is that we callers have been too eager to sacrifice the musical, dancing parts of square dancing in favor of the challenging, puzzle-solving parts of square dancing. Others who have made similar observations have urged us to give up the puzzle in favor of the dance. I don't believe that's either necessary or desirable. The traditional dancing, at its best, offers an experience heavily weighted in favor of dancing over geometric complexity. On the other end of the spectrum, challenge dancing offers an experience heavily weighted in favor of the geometric complexity over the rhythmic movement and musical fit. Both are very fine recreations and provide great satisfaction for most of those who take part in them. It makes sense to me that if we have these two extremes in our activity, we should expect to move along the scale from one to the other in a reasonably orderly fashion. I would expect that the first stage, from traditional towards challenge, the mainstream program, would still offer a very solid musical dancing experience and would restrict the geometric complexity to a fairly simple pattern and concept. Such does not seem to be the case as I observe both what we are doing as callers and what CALLERLAB is advocating. It seems to me that even in the mainstream program, we are pushing dance by definition and conceptually complicated variations of the calls. By the time we get to the advanced program, we no longer allow a relaxed experience. Rather, we require a high-level understanding of the material. While we have good music available, we generally discard the musical phrase as a dancer experience as soon as we move from traditional to mainstream. Many callers routinely hash their singing calls and thereby diminish the musical experience even further. I want to urge that we all review the importance of music and the matching of movement to it in all aspects of our activity. I grant the thrill of complex choreography without reservation. I ask that we not be quite so eager to throw away the equally strong appeal of matching our movement to the rhythm and the phrase of our music. The more complicated the material, the more it is necessary to introduce hesitations, interruptions, extra wording, and extra time to allow dancers to solve the puzzle successfully. These interruptions always detract from the musical experience. Particularly in the mainstream and plus programs, I believe we can add greatly to our customers' satisfaction if we will shift the balance back toward the dancing experience, even at the price of diminished challenge. Now, let us get on with our specific attention to the use of voice as our most important instrument. We're pleased to have the opportunity to discuss voice use And I'm going to start in just a moment or two with a tape that I've prepared that shows some examples of voice use. But I would like to introduce our other panelists. I presume that by now I was introduced twice this morning, I think. Most of you know that I'm Jim Mayo. I suspect most of you also know that that gentleman on the far side over there is John Jones. He's from Arlington, Texas. He too has been a former chairman of our organization and is well liked and appreciated throughout the land for his superior use of vocal technique, as well as his fascinating choreography. Is that how I was supposed to do it, John? Both John and I have the handicap in the square dance calling business of holding a full-time job in addition to calling square dances. This other gentleman beside me here, Bronk Wise, from Gladstone, New Mexico, recently, having moved from the West Coast. And he, I guess I can't really call it a luxury to be a full-time caller without other commitments. But he also has training as a musician and is particularly highly regarded for the musical aspect of his square dance presentation. It's a pleasure for me to work with both of these gentlemen, and we'll get to them in just a minute as soon as Mr. Hilton has connected up the various equipments that are required here to facilitate. I'm vamping until ready, Jim. Is that all right?
Sure, that's great. I'm proud of you.
You're going to plug in a plug there and all those good things.
Check 1, 2, check. Check 1, 2.
That was good for 5 minutes this morning. We hope it'll work for at least that this afternoon. Not me. Thank you. Appreciate it. I hope whoever's making the tape finds we're still plugged in. John and Bronk are going to talk to you about technique, and I need to make the point that, well, your program indicated that this was to be a voice session without being very specific. I got the impression that perhaps we were expected to do the same sort of thing that Arden Hopkin has done at 2 recent conventions, and that was not really our intention. Arden has done a superior job of covering vocal technique and vocal health and all those good things. We wanted to go beyond that and to talk about the showmanship and communication aspects of vocal use rather than just the mechanics and techniques of the physics of voice production. Also, your program mentioned that I had written a book on the subject of voice, and that's indeed true. I wrote it many years ago as a result of voice therapy that I had because I had gotten into vocal trouble as a caller. And at the time, there was no layman's language book on the subject of voice. The professor that I worked with, David Blair McCloskey from Boston University, was the vocal coach who traveled with John Kennedy during his campaign, and he was an early advocate of voice health as well as voice technique. And he has just recently produced a book which is far better than the one I wrote. His is Voice in Song and Speech, and he is a man who is committed to the fact that those are not different techniques. That singing and speaking are very similar, and he is well aware of the health aspects of voice use. For those of you who may wish to buy it, it's privately published, I think, but it's available through the Boston Music Company at 116 Boylston Street in Boston, Massachusetts. The zip code is 02116. And if you are looking for a straightforward book that will help you understand what your voice is and how to use it correctly, this is the best one I know. The name of it is Voice in Song and Speech. It is by David Blair McCloskey, McClosky. From the Boston Music Company, 116 Boylston Street, Boston, Mass. Boylston, Boylston. And the zip is 02116. Now, as I indicated earlier, I have made a tape that I'd like to play for you to show some examples of voice use. One of the things that we're hoping to convey to you today is the message, the importance of communication, not just vocal style and pyrotechnics, but the very essence of vocal communication is to get the message across. And to start that, I'd like to play a couple of examples from outside of square dancing. I think you'll probably recognize both of these.
I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tie that binds. Because you're mine, I walk the line.
Johnny Cash.
Some people say a man is made out of mud. A poor man's made out of muscle and blood. Muscle and blood and skin and bones. A mind that's weak and a back that's strong. You load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
The important thing here is to note that you know what they're singing about. The message of the song comes through. Also interesting to listen to a couple of square dancing's early stars.
Now found your partner, and you corner the two, and wave to the partner across from you, and 1 and 2 go right and left through, while the other two ladies chain. 2, 1 and 3 go right and left through, and the other two ladies chain. 2, 1 and 4 go right and left through, while the other two ladies chain. Now the head spinner wheel round you go, then square through. 4 hands around you, 2 and 5. Now circle forward and break to a line. Go forward 8 and back you reel. Now pass through and wheel and deal. Do a double pass through. First couple go left, next go right. Do a right and left through and turn around and pass through.
Everybody recognized Les Gaucher, right? And his close friend.
Oh, power the partner, and the corner's so well, and look for the old left hand, the partner right and left hand. Right and left, go walking round the hall. Go set the partner, men to the middle and start with the left. Go 1 time in the middle of the set. Come home, turn partner right, 1.5 around. Girls start left in the middle of the town, turn it once around. Come home, partner, turn to the right. Then Alman left your corner, come back 1 and promenade with your lady fair. You take a little walk, go around the square. Go ahead.
Ed Gilmore, of course, and perhaps it was more appropriate, I should say, a close associate than, or contemporary rather than a close friend. Note that although neither of these were great vocalists, I don't think either one of them would have suggested to you that they were great singers. Certainly Les wasn't. I think he owned 2 singing call records, didn't he? And he used them on alternate evenings. The important point is that throughout all of that, the directions to the dancers were very clear. They communicated what the dancers should do, and that was paramount. We had some early callers who were able to do that and get the message through with great strength and clarity as well, and a considerably greater vocal style.
Round the swing and a pop, I made the back home again, and when they get there, it's time for 1 and 3, up to the middle and back. Square through 4 hands about. Dos-sado with the outside to make an ocean wave. Everybody circulate, swing through. Everybody circulate. And the boys run about a girl, and a couple circulate. Wheel and deal in the face of 2. Do down the middle left for the old left hand. Here we go with the bottom left hand. Grand to right and left with the girl. Did a girl in the hook found off. Promenade found the time with the big blown up fiddle in the one down in a...
Bob Van was able to make it musical as well as communicative. And some of you may not have heard Van call recently. That wasn't a recent calling job. It was quite a while ago. Ed Gilmore also did singing calls. In spite of the fact that he didn't have a great singing voice, and he would surely have been the first to tell you that, and did on numerous occasions, he was able to make singing calls that still directed dancing. The message came through.
Side lady chain crossing couples 1 and 3. Square through count 4 hands back with me. With the side circle of 4, break right up, make a line of 4. Go forward 8, come back, slide through. Now 8 chain 2, walk by the next one, go. Swing the next little girly round, then promenade. She'll be driving 6 white horses. She'll be driving 6 white horses. Driving 6 white horses when she comes. Now.
Some of our callers were not only able to make the message come through, but able to make the music work as well. They were very good at making the message fit the music, a technique which we call metering. The words of the call were so structured that they matched the words of the original song. One of these gentlemen is no longer with us, Bill Kastner. I'm sure some of you may remember him. I got in vocal trouble first, many, many years ago, because I tried to sound like Bill Kastner. My voice coach explained to me that I did not have the physical equipment to make that possible.
Well, head 2 couples to right to left through, and wheel the girls around. Face a couple on the right, cross trail through. You turn back and then pass through to a new 2, and do the cross trail through. Swing the caller up and down, and she becomes your rope. Out of and left to corner, out of and right to partner. Go back, swing that corner, lady round. You promenade her and serenade her. She's the little girl who runs the candy store. Well.
And Bruce Johnson.
Couple square through 4 hands away. You do-do the sides and you make an ocean wave. Rock it up and back, all 8 circulate. Right and left through, and when you do the centers, arch, dive through, pass through, square through, 3/4 round. Let tally man come back and promenade the town. Hey, no matter whatever the weather does, we're dancing all together, 'cause we love to dance with you.
We had an early caller. I guess he wasn't all that early, but a caller who was able to hold his own vocally in the world outside of square dancing. Some of you may remember Jack Jackson, who, as a folk guitarist and folk singer, wrote some parodies on folk songs with square dance messages. And one of the interesting things here, I'm going to play you both one of the parodies that Jack wrote and sang, and also a record that Jack recorded, and note particularly the difference in his voice between those two operations. Jack was a caller whose first love was the folk singing, and he used a quite different voice when he was doing that than the one that he used when he was calling for square dances, in which his interest was principally choreographic.
I am a square dance caller. Travel all about whenever I see some dancers. I get my records out. Get my records out, Lord. Get my records out. California down Florida. Go way on up in Maine. I travel all over this country. To call them once again. Call once again, Lord. Call once again. Hadn't been in Ohio many more days than 3 till I fell in love with a pretty little girl. And she fell in love with me. She fell in love with me, Lord. She fell in love with me. Took me to her parlor. She told me with her fan. She whispered in her mother's ear. I love this calling man. Square dance calling man, Lord. Square dance calling man. I wouldn't marry a round dance teacher. Here is the reason why I never knew a round dance teacher who wouldn't tell his wife a lie. Tell his wife a lie, Lord. Tell his wife a lie. Mother, oh dear mother, I'll tell you if I can, if you ever see me coming back. I'll do this calling man. Square dance calling man, Lord. Square dance calling man. I'm a square dance caller. Travel all about whenever I see some dancers. I get my records out. Get my records out, Lord. Get my records out.
Notice the message in his call.
Good couples promenade to go halfway around with a pretty little maid. Down the middle, half square through. Do-so-do with the outside too. All the way, make an ocean wave. Bound and Sarah, don't be afraid. Circulate, then right or left through. Turn the gal around you and dive through and square through. 4 hands around with you. Heads divide and slide through. Swing corner around you. Then animal up with the left hand. Weave the rainbow in grand. In and out around you go. Meet a little lady and promenade. You promenade with a Cajun queen. Take a little walk in New Orleans. You go walking, talking all night long. Sing a little Java song.
Modern square dance choreography is so complex that we, particularly in the patter calls, don't have an opportunity to do much beyond give the command directions. One of the things that often gets callers in difficulty is the attempt to put in patter words. In the early days, when things were less complicated, caller coaches used to recommend that you work out little rhymes that fit each command, and that would enable you to keep the timing right. We don't have time for that anymore, and many of our commands are so short that we need to give them very directly and with very little interference. Note particularly as these next 3 patter callers come along, how little other than command instructions, how little beyond the actual message of dance direction they put into their calling. First of all, Marshall Flipple. You'd have known that anyway.
Promenading. Now 1 and 3, go up to the middle and they come right back. And now pass through and separate, walk around 1, got a line of 4 into the middle and back once 4. The center 4, you square, 2 go 4 hands around while the outside 2, you start through. Now swing through right here. Boy, running out the girl, and now couples trade. Do a Ferris wheel. And the center 2, you start through. Go right on it through and turn all around. But now when you're hold heads up to the middle and you get right back. Then leap to the right and the circle up 4 heads round to go. And to break out 2 lines, move it up and back. Pass through the wheel and kneel. Center 2, pass through, swing through the outside 2. Boys run around that girl, then bend the line and move up to the middle and back. Square through the county, 4 hands, you go all the way.
Dave Taylor, of course. And finally, Bill Peters.
Head to star through, pass through, single circle, make your wave. Well, then the boys trade, boys run around the girl and bend the line. Well, let's do the right and left through, and then flutter, we cross the ring, go 2 by 2. Now touch a quarter, coordinate, go 2 by 2. And then, hey, when you're done, my friend, you Ferris wheel right there. Do a double pass through. Well, then track 2, go 2 by 2, and now swing through. And when you're done, the boys run, bend the line, walk up to the middle and back, touch a quarter there, and all 8 circulate, and the boys run to the right and left 2, and turn, and now dive through, do a zoom, and the centers are right and left 2, and turn them on around square 2. On the third hand, do a Dixie Grand, right, then left, then right, down, and then left, and come on back and promenade that track it well.
In all 3 of those, almost no patter words. No words other than necessary words to direct the dancing action. In presenting those communication words, it's very important that they stand out clearly, that they be properly phrased, that the meaning of those words come through. Showmanship, fanciness, style, technique, all of those are wonderful, but the first thing is the message must come through. In the world of popular music, the man who did the best job, I think by consensus, of sending the message with the song, the thing that made him most successful was his ability to do that, was Frank Sinatra.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way.
The song was there, but the message always came through. Frank was a master at that, and we could learn much from his technique and style. All of this is by way of emphasizing the point that we all want to make today, most importantly, and that is that showmanship is a wonderful thing. Music is a wonderful thing. But for square dance callers in their use of voice, the most important aspect is sending the message. And now my associates are going to divide up the territory. First, John is going to concentrate on the details of how to send that message. And then Bronk wants to talk to you some about showmanship and style and the techniques that make your presentation showy as well as effective. John Jones.
Thank you very much, Jim. I enjoyed listening and reminiscing with the callers that were there. For those of you who are new in the activity and didn't know who they were, you really missed an experience by knowing them. And Jim was very kind in saying that Les Goetcher and Ed Gilmore were friends. They were on totally opposite ends of the spectrum of square dance calling. I thought Dr. Jerry Downing very eloquently said this morning that if you disagree with what he had to say, he would be glad to discuss it with you after the session was over with. If you don't like what I'm saying this afternoon, tough. You hear people constantly say, I did not mean to say that. Yes, you did, or you would not have said it. What has that got to do with voice? Talking is voice as well. So anytime you say something, you're using your voice. If one side of the brain tells you to do something, that computer is working, you say, oh, it came out before I thought. How in the world can it get out without a thought being there to begin with? The computer told you to say what you said, and so you went ahead and said it. If you didn't intend to say it or didn't want to say it, there's a computer on the other side that could tell you just as quickly, don't say that. So be aware of what you say in delivering whatever message that you may have. You hear people say that bad breath is better than no breath at all. Wrong. If you have bad breath, don't breathe. Outwardly anyway. Keep it to yourself. What has that got to do with the voice? A square dance caller uses his voice constantly. If he's not communicating with his dancers off the stage, no, it's not going to come through the microphone. That's not what I mean. But part of being a square dance caller and using your voice, the greatest tool that you've got, is getting off the stage and going around and visiting with the people that you have. And have you ever talked to a square dance caller when they walked up to you, and especially one of those that'll get right in your face, and he just got through having dinner, and he had Roquefort dressing on his salad and garlic bread to go with it, and he said, "Hi," and you nearly passed out. Callers, get you some breath mints or breath spray and clean up your breath before you go around and start talking to everybody. Like I said, if you don't like what I'm saying this afternoon, tough. When you earn your way to this stage, you can say anything you want to. I don't mean to put you down. That's not my intent. I love you. Do you think Jim Mayo would come all the way from New Hampshire to be here with you today? That I would come all the way from Texas to be here with you today? That Bronk would come from New Mexico by way of California to be here with you today, to mislead you and to lie to you and tell you something that we did not believe in? No, we want you to win. We want you to be successful. It's our expense. We don't get paid any money for being here. I could be paid for being at home. But I chose to come here to help you, if I can. 30 years in this business helped me to be here to help you with whatever I can. And I'm glad to do that. I would like to read to you. I've got papers that will be scattered everywhere before this is over with my notes on them. I don't write speeches, I make notes, but I did write this down. A syndicated medical doctor, an MD, Dr. Lester Coleman, has an article that comes out in our local paper every week, and it was quite apropos that this one came out Thursday, and it's called Likely Cause of Hoarseness, and I thought, how better an article could I have to come to here with? And I'll read this. The fact that episodes of hoarseness come and go is the best indication that a tumor, cancer, or growth, now listen to this, does not exist on your vocal cords. Does not exist. For if any such condition were present, the hoarseness would persist, and the episodes would be unchanged, prolonged, and constant. Hoarseness, like pain or fever, is nature's method of calling attention to the body's need for rest and health. Hoarseness is a symptom. It is not a disease. A great many people identify hoarseness with cancer and are petrified by their false, homemade diagnosis. With all the cases of hoarseness that present themselves to doctors, only a small fraction turn out to be of a serious nature. The vocal cords are two strands of muscular tissue about an inch long. They lie in the voice box, or larynx. The voice box is situated in the neck, where the Adam's apple is located. When one speaks or sings, the vocal cords come together and vibrate. When air passes through them, sound is produced. The vocal cords separate when one breathes. One cannot speak and breathe at the same time. Have you ever tried that? Hold your nose. Try this. No, they say John's gone nuts. Yes, maybe I have. But try to get your finger up there and hold your nose. And close your mouth and try to say something. No noise will be produced, so you cannot breathe and speak at the same time. One cannot speak. I've read that. Actually, this is a protective device that keeps food or fluid from passing down into the larynx and into the lungs. Any condition that interferes with the vocal cords coming together in tight contact causes hoarseness. Let me repeat that. Any condition that interferes with the vocal cords coming together in tight contact causes hoarseness. Temporary swelling during a cold, allergic reactions, hemorrhages into the vocal cords due to vocal abuse, polyps, nodules, nodes, and benign or cancerous tumors can all produce hoarseness. Vocal abuse undoubtedly is one of the dominant reasons for periodic episodes of hoarseness. Shouting puts a tremendous strain on the vocal cords. You simply must learn to modify the loudness of your speech. Instead of shouting, it is imperative that you use proper techniques. And it's so very important, and I thought that article fit together with us very well. Sending the message that we constantly keep talking about. A truck driver had been on the road for 30 years, and he decided to retire and go home. After a couple of weeks around the house, he was totally tired of doing nothing. He started looking around the house for something to do. Went up in the attic and found an old trunk sitting over in the corner and walked over and looked inside. And inside the trunk were 3 grains of corn and $55 in cash. And he thought, how strange. And it bothered him all day. And when his wife came home from work that afternoon, he asked her why the 3 grains of corn and the $55 in cash were in the trunk. And she said, I must confess that you being gone on the road for 30 years, traveling as a truck driver, that I got very lonely at times. And each time I had a meaningful relationship with someone, I would put a grain of corn in the trunk. That hurt him real bad. But he thought to himself, 3 times in 30 years, that's not too bad, I guess. He said, oh, by the way, where'd the $55 come from? She said, every time I got a bushel of corn, I sold it. Getting the message sent and hopefully received is extremely important. It does not do any good to send it if it's not going to be received. May I play tape number 1? Jim is going to help me with this. He had all of his on one tape. These tapes were made, it's my calling and some of Mac Letson, some of Mac Letson's calling on our trip to Japan a couple of years ago, and I hope all of you get the chance to go to Japan. Oh, gee, do they do a nice job. And they gave us a whole album of tapes with our pictures on them, listed every call that we did, the record that we did, what side it was on, and everything that happened over in Japan. Not being able to speak a word of English and yet communicating with those people on the square dance floor. It's fantastic and outstanding, and I truly hope that you get to go. You don't have to say a whole lot, as Jim has demonstrated.
Back over around the go and then head couple swing your partner. Lead to the right. Swing through. Boys run right. Couple circulate. Bend the light. Pass through.
You just don't have to use a whole lot of anything to get the message across to whomever you might be communicating with. I hear callers sometimes use a constant line of patter that you never get through. You never hear the entire message that's coming through. And Relay the Deuce is one of the best examples I've ever seen in my life, that we start telling the people to turn with the right hand half and the center's 3/4 and the end's half circulate and get up and swing through, and the rest of you, somebody get off the end and somebody else get up there and move up and do a spin the top whenever you get done. And the new dancer heard Relay the Deuce swing through and spin the top before they get through. And all at once we hollered, whoa, when they get done, they got 2 more calls to do that they heard somewhere along the line. You've got to wean those people after a while. You can't keep them nursing forever. You know, after a while, turn them loose and let them do their own thing and keep right on going with it. Practicing at home without dancers is one of the most false situations that we callers can get into. And we do it all the time, because that's the only place we've got to practice. We get a new record or a new call or whatever it might happen to be, and we start practicing it. If you want to find out what you're doing and how you're sounding, tape what you're doing and then get you a square together and try to dance it. If you want to see what's going on, go look in the mirror. Somebody says, I don't want to look in the mirror. You know the mirror won't lie to you. It will tell you exactly what's going on. And all you got to do is look at it. It'll talk right back to you. You talk to that person, it'll talk right back to you. So you look in the mirror and say, do you have your mouth distorted, whichever way it might happen to be? Why do you look? What kind of a message are you sending? Do you have a scowl on your face while you're calling, or do you have a smile on your face? Or do you have a blank look like I do with nothing on it? Yeah. So you've got to be careful with what you're doing and how you get it across. The use of the microphone, this is an important tool that we've got. A very important tool. Just put me on pause there. Is that the other one? Just not leave it on pause. Okay. And I say something. We square dance callers ought to know how to use a microphone better than anybody in the business. Those who do nightclub entertaining and singers, they know how to use a microphone, and they take great use out of it. Some of these things that we're doing this afternoon, we only have about 20 minutes to get the message across. What I'm trying to get across to you would take me anywhere from 6 to 8 hours to explain all this in a session. So don't think you're going to get the whole message right now. We ain't going to dump the whole load on you because we don't have time. But getting that message across with this microphone and making sure that it stays where it's supposed to be so you can get the thing done. You hear dancers say and you hear callers say sometimes that the message doesn't come across. Well, the reason it doesn't because we don't use the microphone like it ought to be. We don't keep it where it's supposed to be, and we don't use it like we should. Because I've heard a square dance caller say, well, I've got a group of that can't dance anyway, you know what I'm calling it. So the only thing that everybody out on the floor heard was can't dance anyway, right? That really got the message across. That told it exactly like it was. And the statement that I was making was that I have a group of dancers that can't dance anyway, but correctly with the music that we use and the message that we send. So make sure that you know what you're doing with this thing. Never answer a question to a group of dancers on the floor without repeating the question first, so they know what the question was. Because I heard a caller say to the dancers one night, and the only message he sent was, you can't dance anyway. The group in the back of the hall heard that, and all the way up to the front square heard it. And some friend in the front square says, when are you going to let the hammer down and call something? And he answered him over the microphone, well, you can't dance anyway. He was talking to a friend, but everybody in the hall heard it. These things can either make you or break you. Use it like it should be. If you've got a message to tell that front square, move the microphone away from your face. And don't be afraid to go ask for help. If you need help from somebody, go ask for it. Develop your own style. Everybody can't be Wade Driver. Very few want to be. See how the message gets across? And Steve's got it on tape. I'm not saying anything I wouldn't say to Wade if he may be in here. I don't know. I don't think he is. But I wouldn't say anything in here I wouldn't say to Wade to his face. Everybody can't be Tony Oxidine. Everybody can't be Jerry Story. Everybody can't be Ken Bauer. Everybody can't be Gary Shoemake. Everybody can't be Bronk Wise with what he's going to show you to do this afternoon. You've got to be yourself. I thought I could be Les Gocher at one time. Well, he got about in the partner and the corner. I stood like him. I held my microphone like him. I did everything like the man, and I've had tapes played back to me that sounded exactly like what you heard Jim Mayo playing a while ago. I was impressed by the man, and so I became infatuated. Thank you. Wish I was smart. But anyway, I copied the man because I loved what he was doing. He taught me how to sight call 25 years ago, and I've been using it ever since. My singing was John, but my patter calling was not. And my good friend C.O. Guest said, John, if you'd be John Jones again and quit trying to be Les Gocher, you'd be a whole lot better off. Well, he got the message across. I quit being anybody but me. And that's all you can be. You can pick up techniques and styles and certain things from other callers, but you can't be that. use too much volume with two different callers. Now, I apologize, and I know some of them in here. I'll apologize to the Red Boot boys and to Don Williamson and to Red Boot Records for the way this sounds, but this is Mac Letson and me together.
heart's on fire for Elvira. Circle out. Well, get up, boom, up, now, get up. Left alley man.
Terrible. Absolutely awful. But that was under an uncontrolled situation that can get you in trouble. Sometimes, thank God, we've got volume controls on these amplifiers. We can turn the music up loud and cover up some of these mistakes that we make. Here we go. So, calling together on tapes is very important. This is another one of Rocky Strickland and me.
Inside space, grand square. I get so lonely when I dream about you. Can't do without you. That's why I dream about you.
And the only thing I'm showing is volume, where we had balance under a controlled situation there in that regard. Boy, those tapes shoot out of there in a hurry. All right. Now, is this my last one? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, let me see. I got another page of notes here. In 1974, Jim Mayo taught us how to hum. At our first CALLERLAB convention in St. Louis, Jim Mayo got up and did a demonstration on voice and voice techniques, and he taught us how to hum to warm up. I still use that method of humming. There are certain notes that you can hum that will give you more vibration all up in your sinus cavities than any other note, so you have to find your own note and then work around that, whatever it might happen to be. In a caller school, we teach how to do that. And it works, and it helps. But it can also cause a situation for you that dancers have gone and asked Shirley, they said, Shirley, what's wrong with John? And she said, nothing, why? And they said, well, I was sitting over there talking to him a while ago, and all at once he looked off and had a faraway look in his eye and started humming, and I thought I was embarrassing or saying something wrong to him, or he was totally disinterested in what I was saying. She said, no, he's warming up and getting ready for the dance. But I warm up if I'm going to get up to give a speech. These vocal cords are the greatest thing I've got as far as coming out through this microphone and using it. And using it like it ought to be, and treating it the best way you possibly can. Let's take, for instance, that tomorrow, all of you in this room were going to be made the offer that you were going to get a brand new, untouched, unset in 1985 Cadillac. Free of charge. No cost to you. But it will be the last automobile you will own the rest of your life. What would happen if you drove down to the gas station? You wouldn't pull over to the unleaded pump and put in the cheap stuff. Put in the best you've got. I don't want cheap fuel in this automobile. You would change the oil and filter every week, whether it needed it or not. You would not let anybody touch it. You would have signs up around it. Do not touch this automobile. Do not eat in this automobile. Do not drive this automobile. I will do that because it is mine, and I will not let anybody abuse it. What do we do to our body? It's the only one we'll ever have the rest of our life. We abuse it to no end. We sit at the table and eat, and the food is great, and we have our stomachs full, but yet our brain computer has not told us that we are full, even though we know that we are, and say, I've got room for 3 or 4 more spoonfuls or bowls of ice cream. Put it in there, because I can take it. And it spreads out on you. and it's harmful to your body. I have been there. I am there. I know. The voice is the only one you've got. You won't ever have another one. So why abuse it? Don't abuse it. Warm it up. Get it ready. Don't push it. Don't strain it. Don't scream and don't shout. Learn how to project. I learned how to project when I was quite young. I'm a native Texan, but we lived in Mississippi for 10 years growing up out in the country. And a cousin and I lived a full mile apart, but we could hear each other very plainly calling our cattle in the afternoon, our milk cows and our feed cows and what we had. We called pigs and we called hogs, and my daddy could scream so loud you could hear him all the way across town. And I used to play games with him. He would go to the barn and never got to the barn that he didn't turn around and start hollering for me. And I would let him yell and scream till I knew he was fighting mad. And then I'd walk out and I'd say, "Have you been hollering?" And he would want to kill me. But I said, "Sorry, I didn't hear you." I love my daddy. We get along great. But I guess I inherited part of that from him. But you learn to do these kinds of things by warming up and practice. Be willing to devote whatever is necessary to do what needs to be done. Seek the help. Find the help. There's not a guy in the business that won't help you do anything that you can possibly do, that you want to do. You can find the help. All you got to do is ask for it and seek it out. But always be aware of what you say and how you say it. And this, I hope you enjoy listening to this, because I enjoyed finding it on this tape and didn't realize it was on here until I listened to the tape from Japan of me trying to get a message across to beginner Japanese dancers that I was saying something not exactly correct. And they had a problem with it. You talk about dancing DBD, they can dance any call they know in any conceivable position you can put it in. It's a sight caller's dream to go over and call to those people because they can dance so well. And they're such great people. But this is a Texan trying to get a message across to Japanese.
Come back and promenade, keep going, don't stop. Keep going. Put the lady in the lead, single file. Lady in the lead. Lady in front of the man, promenade, single file. Good. Single file, lady in the lead, promenade. Very good. For girls, turn back, go the other way. Do a U-turn back, girls, go the other way. Meet your partner, swing your partner. Promenade, and a right back home, around and you, and promenade, go around the ring, and a right back home with a pretty little girl in there. Join the hands, circle to the left, go around the ring, circle to the left. Reverse back, single file, go the other way. Single file. Everybody stop just a minute. Whoa, stop. What's stop? Huh? Mate. In Texas, whoa. Okay?
Listen to that.
Remember, mate. Whoa. Stop. Okay? Good. Square your set. Circle to the left. Circle left. Mate. Reverse. Circle other way.
Y'all gotta listen now.
Mate. Stay. Stand. Drop hands. Turn loose. Keep going same way. Single file. Go. Promenade. Single file. Mate. Whoa. Don't go yet. Wait. Let me explain. When I call, ladies turn back. Hi.
You hear me say hi? That's yes.
On the outside, men on inside, Mati. When I say go, men will go inside, ladies will go outside. Ready, go. Promenade, single file, twice around. Twice. Dos, two.
You must be able to get the message across in the proper way. One way or another. All at once they were Spanish to me, and I... British Airways was advertising a special 30-day all-expense-paid trip to London and return for $600. A man ran to the ticket counter and said he wanted one of those tickets before they were all gone. They sold him a ticket, gave him the ticket, and told him to proceed through a certain door. He went through the door, and the guy inside that door took his ticket. He turned around, this man hit him over the head and knocked him out. When he came to, he was handcuffed to an oar of a large rowboat. He turned to this Texan sitting next to him and said, "Do you think they'll fly us back?" And the Texan replied, "They didn't last year."
Thank you, John. John always has a great way of making the message come through with humor. Bronk, I'm glad I don't have to follow that act. From Gladstone, New Mexico, Bronk Wise.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, look here at my wife right here in the front row, and she's sitting here listening to John saying dose like that. She's looking at me, and she's shaking her head. She says, 9 months. We're going over and doing that thing in Japan, their winter festival. And we've been brushing up on our Japanese, and I've had the same problem. I was saying ichi, ni, san, shi, go, quattro. I was having that kind of trouble. Really, we're trying to mix. That's the truth. We really have that trouble. But the funny thing about that is I was listening to him teach that stuff. That sounded like my regular workshop. I don't know about y'all. What I'd like to talk about was I'd listened to John on the tape, and I'd like to talk to you. First of all, guys say, I was talking to a fellow a while back, and he says, you know, I'm working in a retirement center now, and I'm doing 14, 15 sessions a week. And he says, I'm losing my voice. I said, well, I'm not accustomed to that, but I know a lot of the guys are, and they aren't. And I listened to his tape, and I'll talk to you a little bit about something I listened to John do on the tape. And I'm not crediting anybody for records on these, but I want you to listen to this tune. Now, for me to use this record, my key that I would use it is I would say, but if John Jones were to use it, that'd be too high for John Jones. John Jones would be using it saying, roll by to your partner in the corner too. And I can get the same message across in either of those. And it sounded like a whole different thing if I said in one key. John calls in a harmonic to that record. And I want to talk to you about a little bit about my musical background and share that with you and help you with your pattern call, and you won't lose your voice. Now, again, let's talk about me using this record. Here's my key, my root chord. And that's fine. That doesn't bother my voice. I'm going to turn it over. Now, where's the root chord? Can you think of it? Can you sing it to yourself? Okay. I have found that my voice became very tired when I used records, pattern records, that were actually too low for me early in my career. That I could use records that were a little too high and kind of get a little squeaky and still get through it, not bother myself. But when it's too low, like that record's a little bit low for my voice range, I found that I could go to a higher harmony and hit my same voice range. Now I want you to listen to something. Here's the original record I played for you. All right, now let's listen to this one. And I used the same note for the hold down that was in a different chord. In other words, I called in harmony, and I noticed that there's a number of the lady callers here that I know full well are well aware of learning how to call in harmony with the music, because generally the records are recorded in keys that are comfortable for most men callers. And I feel that if you can develop this little technique, that little thing, that if you can pick up records and you say, that really sounds good, but I can't use it. There's really, if you can learn to use the chords in the hoedown to your best advantage, you can use any record that comes out. I'll give you another example. Did any of you guys use Skillet Lickin' on Blue Star? Any of you guys use that? It's a good record. It really is. That's one of my favorites because that's my favorite key to call in. All right. That's G. That's a G. Now, the other side is the thing called Liza. Good music, too. It's in the key of C. Okay? Harmony to the key of C is the key of G. I was very comfortable with that other side. Okay. And if you can find that with your records, and I know that some of you will get the tape and you can remember that, and you talk about your harmony, sometimes you can get your message across a lot better. I do not feel that when I call, that if I call in a lower key, that my message comes across well. I feel it gets a little dull for me. When I go up to a higher key, my message does come across and it doesn't bother my voice. Most people are under the impression, in talking to a lot of callers, that the higher you go, you're really straining your voice. And that's not necessarily true. You can strain your voice in either direction. Jim was saying that he was trying to sound like Bill Kastner. When I first started calling, I tried everything in the world to sound like Dick Holton. And Dick Holton has a very low voice, and I was not cut out for it. And yes, I hurt my voice also. So if you think about using harmonies on your patter calls, which I'll come back to patter in a little while, you'll improve your voice technique. This is a record called Waiting for the Robert E. Lee. A lot of you guys use it. Everybody's heard this, haven't they? Waiting for the Robert E. Lee at one time or another. If they haven't done it themselves, they've heard somebody call it. While letting it play, Ernie communicated to me that a couple of the guys had written hi-hats saying that the key was changed from the old record. Well, it's not. It's not the same one. Okay? But here's what the problem is. Nate dancing on the levee, swinging on the Robert E. Lee. The guys had problems with hitting that high note for the Robert E. Lee. And the thing that bothered them the most is this record modulates or goes up a key at the end, and that note gets really high. Okay? Yeah, and that really bothered guys. Now tell me if the message is not effective here. It's simply great, Nate dancing on the levee, swinging on the Robert E. Lee. Now, did not the message come across just as well? Okay, so what I'm telling you is when you get a singing call and you say it's good but it's a little too high, reevaluate it and say, can I drop down to a note that I am comfortable with to sell it? And that's a prime example. I know a lot of you guys that use a lot of slow and sexy numbers. I've heard a lot of you call. And I found a technique that I discovered from Willie Nelson and listening to his record that works very, very well. It's called Don't You Ever Get Tired. And it starts off and it goes like this. Well, you made my eyes run over all the time, sugar. Now, okay, so instead of going up high like maybe that record does, that little all the time sugar, just sold that, because you know what the crowd's going to do when you do something like that. They're going to say, whoo. And you like the crowd to say, whoo, don't you? Yeah, that's right, whoo. So that's a little thing from Willie Nelson, is that, well, a lot of guys talk about Willie Nelson, and I heard that Arden Hopkins one time, the time that John Jones headed for the stage, he said Willie Nelson couldn't sing. I saw John got all upset, and that he'd say something like that about Willie Nelson. Is Willie Nelson a good singer? Yes, he's a good singer. He has a wonderful voice range. He's very true with his notes. But the one thing people say, they said it feels like he's speaking. He's not speaking. You can understand every word he says. And as square dance callers, especially with your patter calls, do you think that our most important thing is that everything you say should be understood? And that is probably the most thing. If people can understand you, more than likely they can dance to you. If they cannot understand you, they're going to have an awful hard time. Which leads up to my next point. I was very fortunate that in my early years of calling, I lived 6 blocks from a traveling call, the hall where you had a traveling callers club. So in my very early years of my calling, I could go and hear a lot of the guys like Frank Lane and Marshall Flippo and that type, and hear what they had to say. I even heard Max Forsythe there one time, which was a great treat. And one of the things I noticed about all these fellows is they called with their mouth open. And you could understand every word they said. For example, if I said, the head 2 couples square through versus the head 2 couples square through, it came across, and I thought, these guys made funny motions with their mouths. They made funny motions. I couldn't figure out why they did that. Now I realized why. And what made them good callers? Because I could understand every word they said, and they did it in a nice manner. And I say this to you, do not be afraid to call with your mouth open, your throat open, diaphragm open, and project. You know, and I've watched John call before, the National, and he opens his mouth, he projects. Jim Mayo, I watched him speak up here, and he was very important with him. When I first started calling, I fought with a speech impediment, and I learned to open my mouth so that wouldn't happen. So please remember, probably the most important thing to you in your calling is be understood. Let the dancers know what you're thinking unless it's something negative. Open your mouth and call. He mentioned several of the guys that were important in my career, the guys that I liked. One of them was Ken Bauer. And Ken Bauer adopted a lot from hearing Max Forsythe. I'm very sure that if you heard an early tape of Max Forsythe and you hear Ken Bauer, you can hear a big similarity in that calling style. And I listened to these fellows and I thought, why? What made them do that? Why did they sound so good? What made them unique? And I realized why when I heard Don Franklin several years ago. I'm sure you know Don. He retired from the activity. They play little games all the time that they call. And just listen to this, just chord-wise, what I can do with this. And I'm just going to make singing sounds, and let's hear. Now, everything in there was strictly a harmonic of those chords that they used on that record. That's Bones on ESP before somebody asks. And that's what made them important. How many of you heard Don Franklin call? A lot of you. Have you ever heard him up there saying, Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O? Did you ever notice him ever say that? No, you didn't. But he sang Old MacDonald all night long. And people said, boy, he had a neat style. And he sang little songs in his patter call all evening. And if you can maybe play that game during your right and left grands or Weave the Ring or sometime where you have time to fill in with words, it's very effective, it comes off well, and it does nothing to hurt your voice to play a little game. Okay? Another point I'd like to make is about shouting. I've heard dancers come up and they've danced to myself and maybe Jerry Story, Larry Letts, and they say, boy, the guys were up there shouting and hollering and having a big time. But what they don't know is what's going on there is mic technique, not shouting. Okay? And my normal calling voice would be about like this, because I open up and I come out from my diaphragm. And I want all 4 men to promenade. Did my voice go that much higher? No, it didn't. I pushed the mic up to my mouth. And they have wonderful things on sets. I don't know if you're aware of them, but they're called volume controls. And they work very well. And a lot of the guys, I realize, don't realize that there's a volume control on the set. I've also found that after I've had a cold or a bout with allergy or something like that, hay fever, I've also found that as the night goes on, there may be a necessity to turn up the volume control. If your throat gets sore, lower your voice a little bit and turn up the volume control. Don't hurt yourself worse than you're already hurt. I have made that error. I reviewed with some of the guys. I listened especially to Jerry Story last year. I had the occasion to call a whole week with him. And I watched him, and Jerry is very much that way. His voice level does not change that much, but he comes up and he runs up and down scales and everything like that. It's just he knows how to use the volume controls on his set. Another way to save your voice, let's talk about the tone controls on your set. If you want to bring out a certain instrument, Hilton's talking about the equalizers that he puts out on the sets that you can bring up fiddles in your music or that kind of thing like that. Even with what you've got here, you can make a lot of play. This is Piano Roll Blues on Red Boot. And take a listen to this. A little more prompting, but music, this is effective. 4 ladies chain. Chain and back. Circle to the left. Do an element on left and corner, weave around that ring. And you see that I just played with the volume a little bit. I played with the tone controls, and all I did was prompt. I hardly ever got in key with the music. And I do that. And I've had people say that's a great singing call. I do very little singing in that call. I let the music speak for itself because it is good. Another example. How many of you know Dick Jones? Late Dick Jones? Do you remember him? A lot of you? Here's one I stole from Dick, borrowed from Dick. Let me get to it here. I'm not exactly sure what it was in the record. Head square through to the slide trombone. Do better side though. There you go. And if you call their attention to this, again, you saved your voice just a little bit. When my throat's a little sore, these are the kind of records I pull out the most, to where the record, the sound, the music can sell more than what I can. And remember that music is our greatest ally as a caller. And probably our most important thing as a caller is to come across as being A, friendly to the dancers, and B, let them understand what you've got to say and make it a good message, not a negative one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bronk. We have about 15 minutes left on our scheduled time, and there's an open microphone back there. If any of you have questions of any of us, we would welcome the opportunity to enter into some discussion. In order to be sure that we get all of the questions and the answers onto the tape, we do urge that if you have something to ask, don't all leap up at once. Are you headed for a microphone? I got one headed for a microphone, way down back. There we go. Please say who you are and then ask us.
Dale Dockery from California. During travels, callers have a tendency to have real slack periods in their calling, and then they'll go wholeheartedly for, say, about 20-something days in a row. How do you set yourself up for those periods when you're calling 20-something days in a row?
Proper exercise and practice. I hear from over here. It should also be noted that the long use of your voice is not damaging. Most muscles benefit from exercise, and in the case of the vocal cords, they are muscles, and they too will benefit from proper use. If you mistreat them, they'll hurt. But if you're using them correctly, the extended use will do them no harm. In fact, it'll do them better. The real problem in that situation is the 10-day gap that you may encounter.
Oh, yeah, to address that, too, I will say another thing. After the dance is over, don't stay up too late. If your voice is tired, your body is tired, you're exhausted, you'll lose your voice. And let me tell you, I know, because I went out, the longest tour I ever went out on was away from home was like something like 67 days, night after night, calling dances. And I lost my voice, and it doesn't do you any good to lose your voice, just mainly because I stayed up late every night and visited and whatever. And I hate to tell you this, another thing that can really hurt your voice is alcohol. It will hurt your voice. You stay up late, you drink 7, 8, 9, 10 drinks. The next day you are going to have voice trouble.
That ain't all.
Now that depends on the individual.
Absolutely right. That's a good way to abstain because alcohol doesn't help a bit. Go.
Jim Diffie, Nevada City, California. That fits in with my question. I wanted to know what you do on an ongoing basis to protect your voice, say over as a regular program.
The first answer to your question is the one that John mentioned. Be sure that you do get it warmed up before you use it, that you do use it correctly. If you start to have problems with it, the tone control or the volume control technique that Bronk mentioned, very important. Do not over-stress it when it's in difficulty. But, John, you want to add something to that? No? The name of the game is use it correctly. Do not strain it. Use it properly. If you have an extended period of use planned, lay off the alcohol. One drink is enough to cause you trouble. If you're calling on a regular basis, if you're doing a weekend, parties are fun. Drink warm liquids. Go.
Art Daniels from Los Angeles, California. I'm curious to know, is there a trend toward the extemporaneous patter being cut out? For an example, if I'm saying, do the yellow man left, weave the ring like a right and left grand. Weave it in and out until you meet your mate, you latch right on, and you promenade Kate. Is that now obsolete?
Not at all. John?
Don't misunderstand the message. Okay? What we are saying is you don't have to do that all the time. Do it when it feels like it. When it feels good, do it. Or when it fits, do it. But you don't have to do it all the time, and don't let fill-in patter overload a command.
Thank you.
Ken Lucky Packer from Salt Lake City, Utah. John, would you possibly dwell a little bit deeper into that subject of humming to the point of resonance? So me and maybe some others.
Maybe I should let Jim Mayo do that since he developed it. But have you ever seen anybody get up early in the morning and go, and then proceed to do the first thing they do every morning anyway, and they say, boy, them cigarettes are good. I still smoke. I wish I didn't. I wish I had never smoked in my life. One of the worst things in the world you can do to a voice is suck on cigarettes. I can promise you that because I've been there. But the humming thing, let's practice. It won't take but a second. You find a note. I don't care where it is up and down the scale. I don't care what it sounds like in here. You do your thing, but start humming and go up and down the scale a bit until you find that note that gives you more vibration in the face than any other, okay? Everybody try it. I don't care what it sounds like. Okay, now, go ahead and take breaths and keep doing it, and a note on either side of that. Go up one note, come back to it, go down one note. Right in that range. Okay, do you feel the vibrate? It will vibrate all 8 sinus cavities. You may stop humming now if you wish. Sound like a bunch of bees in a den, a hive. But that is a good technique for warming up. Also, I don't know whether you've ever been around opera singers or not, but I have. I'm not an opera buff. I used to play it all the time, but opera's not my thing. I came from the country. My brother was a long-haired classical musician. Played oboe and English horn, and I'd go sneak in there and get it and pick it up and play the Snake Charmer song. Near, 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 near. And he'd come running through the house, totally upset with me, because I played drums and country music all the time. But opera singers are constantly warming up. Oh, 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 oh. They open up the tube. They learn how to open up the tube. From the stomach, from the diaphragm, up into the throat should be one long, hollow tube for mellow sounds. You want to kill your voice? Get it mellow and choke it to death. With a tie or anything that's too tight,
and choke your vocal cords completely off, and you'll ruin your voice. Loosen it up. And the sound should come. If you want to hit a high note, Bronk will tell you this. If you want to hit a higher note or increase your range, work on it. You've got to constantly work on it. It's like running a mile. Well, I want to run 2 miles. Well, until you get ready, you can't run 2 miles. So you've got to go a little bit at a time. It's the same way. There's a limit, yes, that the voice will go to, but you can increase your voice range by working on it. Practice, exercise, working up and down. Opera singers do this all the time. You shoot high notes right out through the top of your head. They don't come out through your mouth. The sound does, but the note itself is I'm going to shoot it right out through the top of my head. And I can get a higher sound out of it, also a more mellow sound. Have you ever seen Dean Martin sing to the floor? Sure. He's got the tube down, and it's open. Question?
Yes, my name is Jim Strava. I'm from right here in Phoenix, Arizona. And my question is there a way that you can learn to do gravelly voice techniques or high falsettos without hurting your voice?
High falsettos won't hurt you, but I would strongly recommend that you lay off of the gravelly stuff, because what's doing is you're knotting those vocal cords together, just going.
When you're saying gravelly voice techniques, are you talking about growling, like Four Ladies Promenade, that kind of thing like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. John's right. If you get away with that, I wouldn't do it all evening long. If you want to do it once or twice, it's okay. But yes, when I went out on the road the first time, I decided I wanted to growl a lot. And yes, when you go out there, I mean, about on that third day, when you start those growls start disappearing, they just don't come out. And by the way, if you guys, I found something this year I'd like to share with you. I know you guys know what Robitussin cough syrup is. Robitussin now comes in a solid form called Robitussin DM cough suppressant drops. Now, they're not going to make you, they're going to be like that Roquefort dressing kind of thing. I mean, they don't taste good. But I'll say one thing for you. If your throat's a little sore, it'll sure help you get through that 3 hours. Yeah, so it's Robitussin DM drops.
Boots Meloids will also do the same thing.
But let me warn you that there are some sore throat treatments on the market that are surface anesthetics. They deaden the sensation in your throat. Those will put you out of business. Chloroseptic, because they will deaden the sensation in your tongue, and if you can't feel in your tongue what's going on, you cannot speak clearly. Enunciation requires that you be able to speak clearly and to feel the sensations in your tongue. If you put a surface anesthetic on them, you're out of business. Be careful. Is that another question coming? One more. I think we got time enough for her. Go.
Fred Kirkpatrick from Ridgecrest, California. And I'd also like to say that a couple of things you hadn't touched on is on communication, the ends of the words are more important than the beginning of the words. The end of the word.
The ends of the words also are those that are left off most commonly by callers. One of the most common calling problems is the temptation to let the voice die at the end of a word or at the end of a phrase. Many callers don't take in an adequate breath, and so they start talking. Pretty soon they run out of breath, and at the end of the phrase they can't hear a word. Then they take a breath, and you can hear them again for a little while, and then at the end of the thing they back. And then they start over. They'll go on like that all night long, and people will hear the first few words in a phrase, the tail end of it, they're so busy reading the great cue card in the sky that they forget to breathe. And it's a poor substitute. You're absolutely right.
And another point is if when you're practicing, if you'll take a deep breath, not on any note you're comfortable with, and just hold it and see how long you can hold it. And if you do that for a while, you'll find that your volume capacity will increase, where you'll be able to sing a little longer on one breath and fill your lungs completely when you do it. And I use a monitor a lot. A monitor, if you have a monitor coming right back to you, you can hear what you're putting out. That's just my...
Interesting to note with respect to hearing what you're putting out. What you hear of yourself is in fact not what other people hear, because you hear yourself through the internal passages in your head. It rattles the bone structure and moves the eardrum that way, not the sound that comes out through your mouth. Some of it you hear through the ear, coming in as other people hear it, but most of what you hear of your own voice is that which did not make it out. It stayed inside. That explains why what you hear on the tape recorder does not sound to you like yourself, even though it does sound to other people like you. Because what you hear is what failed to make it out of your head, not what did make